Religion, Values and Ethics in the Contemporary World. In this session, we will have 5 speakers. They are Mr. Mulyadi Kartanegara from UIN Syarif Hidayatullah, Ms. Hadil Lababidi from Friedrich Alexander University Erlangen Nuremberg. Ms. Hadil will present online in Zoom. And then Mr. Brett Sarves from International Center for Religion and Law Studies, Brigham Young University. Mr. Zainal Asanusi from International Islamic University of Malaysia. And Mr. Budi Irawanto from Performing and Visual Arts Studies Program, UGM Graduate School. And the moderator of this session is Dr. Samsul Marif. So without further ado, we will give the opportunity to Dr. Samsul Marif to moderate us in this session. Please, Dr. Samsul, thank you.
Thank you, Mas Eric. Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom. Namo Buddhaya, Amitabha, Rahayu. So our main session 2 is on religion, values, ethics in the contemporary world. So the world we are living right now, or we have been living in, offers more issues to deal with, more problems to handle, more opportunities to pursue. And religion and ethics have also come with some basic and foundational questions with regard to that. But again, the world comes and offers more complicated issues and problems. The world, as if it has its own agency and directions. We deal with it and it goes to its own directions. The world, it seems to tell us that the more we think about, the more we do things in developing the world, the more they offers us more issues and problems. I believe we have a lot of questions, and we invite 5 outstanding scholars in dealing or in discussing about contemporary world and issues. There are many issues in this contemporary world, and again, our focus is on religion and ethics. So let's start our discussion by inviting first Professor Dr. Mulyadi Kartanegara, said by Mas Eric. He is an Islamic theology, philosophy, and Sufism professor from UIN, the State Islamic University, Jakarta, UIN Syarif Hidayatullah. He was also, by the way, the academic director of CRCS graduate school here. So in 2002, he was my professor when I was there. So glad to have him here. And then time is yours, Prof. Mulyadi, for us. And so we have 1 hour and a half to spend time here with 5 speakers. So probably 15 minutes would be maximum for us to spend for each speakers. Okay, Prof, time is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Just this one?
Yeah, this one.
Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'm very happy to be invited by this committee because I used to be here for about 20 years ago. Yeah, okay. Being the first executive director of CRCS. It's like a written home for me, you know. So this occasion, I like to talk about the moral basis of economics and politics in Islamic scientific tradition. The introduction. Next, please. Okay. The introduction is kind of a problem that maybe we face today about economics and politics. I said the morally uprooted contemporary economics and politics. So economically, morally, we have the secular economics and politics with no regard to moral or religious values. I said both disciplines, which is economics and politics, have been studied and practiced for more pragmatic and mundane purposes. In politics, ethical and moral values are put aside in the favor of material gain and authority, passing over all the moral and religious considerations. In economics, the main purpose is how to gain as much as benefits from as little possible capital. In this occasion, I would like to present to you Muslim philosophers' theory of economics and politics. Economic and politics as a practical sciences, al-ulum al-amaliyya. In the Islamic scientific tradition, knowledge or science has been divided into two main groups. This is the called transmitted sciences, the al-ulum al-naqliyya, and rational sciences. This is the rational sciences. And rational sciences are divided into two: theoretical, or al-ulum al-nazariyya, and practical sciences. This is the al-ulum al-amaliyya. Economic and politics belong to practical sciences, whose target is a thing or objects to be known to us as it is, while the practical sciences target is human voluntary actions, meaning that only human being can act freely, and based off that, human being called the moral beings. Ethical basis of economics and politics in Islamic scientific tradition. Practical sciences began with ethics, understood as a theory of morality, ilm al-akhlaq, whose scope is an individual. It aims to produce a good and just person, or adil. So, ethics is different from morality. Morality is just human conduct. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. But ethics is the theory of morality. This is a practical guidance for becoming a good person. Okay? Economics is an ethical discipline. All practical sciences belong to ethics because it's related to human action, is supposed to be free. Okay? It differs only in scope. While the scope of ethics is individual, that of economics is family or household. So it is not surprising that this science is also called the science of household management, tarbil and manzil. Like economics, politics belongs to ethics, with society standing as the scope. So what the big difference between ethics, economics, and politics is only the scope. But all deal with human action. And that's why three of these practical sciences are basically moral, belong to morality. Okay. Economics in philosophical perspective. Islamic scientific tradition, economics following Greek tradition, is understood as the management or administration of household, tadbir al-manzil. It consists of 5 pillars: house itself, understood as the, like protection or for member of family, whether it is made of stone or regardless of that. As long as can give protection to the family, that is called house. The second, finance, which is dealing with how to get money, and how to spend it properly. And then management of wives, management of children, including children education, and management of maiden. In all these managements, ethical and moral values are always highly considered by scholars as the fundamental guide and for all economics conducts. House, in its various forms, is considered necessary for keeping a family member safe from extreme weather and wild animals. In seeking provision, risk, we must take into consideration moral values. So not just making money, and regardless of how you do it, both in the method of gaining it, the kind of profession we hold, and in saving it and spending, impacts it rightly to the deserved one. So in the Islamic perspective, if you get money, you should spend it in accordance to moral and religious. For example, there is a God's right to your property. For example, you have to, pay zakat, sadaqah, in fact. This is one of the pillar of the principle of economics, Islamic economics. So after that, you spend to your family member and to your neighbor, and only after that you save it. Okay. In choosing a wife or husband, moral and religious values should come first, such as the integrity, loyalty, intelligence over beauty and wealth. So there's a priority, You will not choose beauty as the first and wealth, but it's more to loyalty or religion or something like that. So even in choosing your couple, moral and religious considerations should come to your mind. This is the meaning of moral basis of economics. In managing of our children, giving good names to them, to the parent, is considered as a parent's duty. Also, the parents should teach the children both morally and intellectually. So there is a moral education and intellectual education. They should know how to dress properly, what is the purpose of eating, and how they should eat and drink properly, and how to behave toward the elderly, teachers, and dignitaries. So this is belong to economics, because economics in Islamic perspective is a management of household. So not only earning money, about the methods, but also teaching your children good behaviors. Okay. In dealing with your maidens, we should employ them according to their capacity and expertise. You cannot, ask them to do all, because maybe their capacity is limited. And also give time for their natural needs. Like us, maidens also, need to go to the restaurant and something like that, and even to rest. Don't fire them for the trivial mistakes. And of course, pay them justly in time according to the contract. So all these economic activities based on moral and religious consideration. Politics in a philosophical perspective, the foundation. The man's need for a community. Man is a social being, meaning that they cannot live, in isolation. Even for your clothes, you need someone else. You cannot make your own clothes, or even the material for that. So it is very obvious that man needs other people, and that's why God also give them the different orientation, different hobby, and different expertise. So they provide different things for different and diverse human needs. And community, usually the smallest the unit is a family, and then village, city. The combination of city can be a community, and of course the world. The purpose of creating community or states in this methods is to make possible people's achieving their prosperity, happiness, and perfection. So the state is needed in order to make it possible people reaching their perfection and happiness, you know. And being a social being, social creature, they cannot live in isolation. They need the cooperation. Man, as a social being, man cannot live without others. Therefore, he needs cooperation. But cooperation needs a good government or management. And according to Muslim philosopher, love is uniting factor in building up a society. However, since love is frequently taken over by hatred, law becomes necessary to make sure that justice is being served. Community, city, or states. You know, when Al-Farabi wrote Al-Madina Al-Fadila, you know, they call state is a city. So, and the time is, I mean, very usual, you know, to have states in the form of city, like Singapore maybe. You know, just one city, but it's also considered. They call it Medina, which is city. So the smallest political entity is maybe city. Okay. City is divided by philosopher or philosopher from ethical perspective into the ideal one and non-ideal one. They call Al-Madina Al-Fadila, the perfect city or the perfect state. And they say that the ideal one is a state whose people have similar views and acts in tune with the truth. According to logics, just constitution and political regulation, the ideal community is just one type. So, you know, this division of ideal states and non-ideal state is also morally, you know, considered, based on the moral consideration. So the ideal state is where the king, the ruler, knows how to achieve the real happiness. They have the knowledge of achieving this real happiness, and they teach the people and ask people to do as they believe, you know. But the ideal community is considered as just one, you know. There's no other. But then, outside of ideal communities, there's non-ideal communities, which is divided into three. They got the ignorant community, Jahila, and a corrupt society, which is Al-Madina Al-Fasiqah, and misled community, Al-Madina Al-Dawla. The ignorant society or state is a political community whose subjects do not use reasoning or power of intellect. Their civilization is based on irrational power. They do not have real purpose in political life. So this is why this is called ignorance, because they don't know actually the science of state government, and they don't know even the purpose. They don't know what the real happiness. So they act based on their ignorance. The corrupt community or states is a political community whose people are capable of using reason, so they know actually, but they use non-rational powers in building up their civilization. You know it, but you don't do it. So you act like the ignorant. Well, you actually know. So this is the corrupt or fasiqah. Their belief is actually correct and in line with truth, but they do not behave according to their beliefs. On their own will, they follow the behaviors of the ignorant community or state. So this is I mean, it reflects in many current states. You know that regulation, but you just you don't follow the regulation, and this is of course the source of corruption. And then misled community is a political community whose subjects, due to their insufficient intellectual capacity, imagine wrongly their own constitution and consider it as a virtue. And based on their false virtue, they build their civilization and fantasize the happiness that will gain is the same as the true happiness. Therefore, it will not lead to the real happiness. So some people said that happiness, when you reach, for example, you have the wealth and power, but it's not the actual real happiness. So that's why this community belongs to non-perfect community. Moral consideration can be clearly seen when we talk about the necessity and purpose of constitution as follows. Since human beings are often dominated by lust, shahwa, and anger, ghadab, they need, willing or not, a constitution standing up right upon the foundation of justice, so people are not afraid of others. So communities should be built on justice. That's why it is important in the beginning that in ethics you should be a just person. So when you are a just person, then when you economists, you will be just economic actors or agents. And so also when you are a leader, you will be a just leader. Okay? And by serving just, people are not afraid of others. The specific task of constitution is to establish universal justice. So justice actually is the purpose of all these practical sciences. Okay. Ethics, economics, and politics actually, lead to the justice, and justice will lead to the happiness. Meaning that constitution should take a decision based on the universal justice, wherein no one should be given something more than he deserves. Sometimes, this it's not a right person, but you give the not just right position, or given power when it's not really yet ready yet. Political management or government has two aspects, theoretical and practical. Theoretical aspect is wisdom of knowledge of political government in general sense. This is the main basis of political government. So, political management should be based on right knowledge, meaning you should have knowledge of that. But, of course, not enough, You should have also practical aspect, which is the application of practice of the political governance, considered as the completion of it. So first you have to have a knowledge, but not enough. You have to practice it. So this is, you do two sides of the management wisdom. Conclusion. In Islamic scientific tradition, economics and politics belong to ethical realm. Ethics, economics, and politics belong to the same class as the practical sciences, different only in their scope, individual, family, and community. Therefore, they cannot be detached from ethical and moral consideration. Morality indeed becomes their philosophical basis or foundation. Indeed, it is by following the ethical values that people, together with their family and community, can achieve the ultimate goal of their life, with its real happiness and perfection. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. Mulyadi. I think the main basic arguments that we could learn from Prof. Mulyadi is that in dealing with the world today, with many problems, Islam could be one of the moral reference in economy and politics. that has conceptualized the management, from the management of house, communities, even to the state. So there are moral references that we could share, we could discuss as a way to deal or respond to the world. We actually have one speaker we are still waiting for online, Dr. Hadil Labadidi, who is going to talk about actually about debate or different perceptions in Islam in dealing with like medical treatment. But while waiting for her, oh, is she there now? Dr. Ladidi, Dr. Hadil Labadidi.
She's muted.
Dr. Hadil, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me as well? Hello?
Hello?
Test, test. Test, test.
Hello.
Test, 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 test. Hello, hello, hello.
Over there.
Test, 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 test.
Or could we move to the next speaker and coming back to Dr. Hadil?
Test, test, test. Test, test, test. Test, 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 test.
Gimana?
Test, test. Test. Halo, halo, halo.
Dr. Hadil, can you try to give us your voice?
Test, test, test. Hallo, hallo. Test, 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 test. Hallo?
Yes,
Yeah?
we hear you. Okay.
Now you can hear me?
Yes. Okay. Can you
Okay.
can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you very
Great.
well.
Okay, great. Okay, so we are going to you. So Dr. Hadil Labadidi is a professor teaching at the Friedrich Alexander Universitas Erlangen, Nuremberg, Germany. And she is going to talk about, as I said before, current issues in medical ethics at the end of life. The case of artificial nutrition and hydration. So among the work that we learned from her is that she is also dealing with how Muslim perceptions for that case. So we want to hear that, Dr. Hadil. And so times is yours. 50 minutes would be good for you to share your insight with us. So times is yours.
Thank you, everyone, and good afternoon to Indonesia. Good morning in Germany, actually. From a sick state to a sick body, we are now dealing with current issues in medical ethics at the end of life, the case of artificial nutrition and hydration. Nutrition and at the end of life, in the context of dementia, is highly contested. Dementia is an organic disease of the brain and a common feature of different types of diseases such as the Alzheimer's disease that causes a progressive deterioration of cognitive function of the memory, which is linked with communication, personality change, and motor disorders. Especially at the terminal stage of dementia, which is characterized by swallowing difficulties or the loss of appetite, which lead to weight loss and dehydration. And a more frequent medical procedure in this case is artificial nutrition and hydration, which can be given through a gastrostomy tube. A central question when using tube feeding is whether it is a medical treatment or a basic need. Depending on how the question is answered, a different decision can be made as to whether the treatment should be continued or whether it is allowed to refuse it. So the question in my presentation today, is it permissible from an Islamic perspective is it permissible to refuse tube feeding at the end of life? If you decide to classify it as a medical measure, you have the opportunity to refuse or to treat via tube feeding. It's in the area of self-determination. But if you decide tube feeding is a basic need, you are bound to tube feeding. You have to, as a physician, you have to pursue this medical treatment because otherwise you would violate your duty to care for the patient, and it might be classified as an indirect killing if you do not use tube feeding. And if you understand it as a basic need, and a person decides to refuse tube feeding, it would be in the area of the prohibition of suicide, which is also stated in the Quran, do not kill yourself, and it is forbidden, and God would therefore deny entry into the paradise. So you see, it is important how you classify this tube feeding, either as a medical measure or a basic need. So the refusal would not be allowed if you classify it as a basic need. First, I will give you a brief overview of the stages of dementia, of the dementia disease, and then give you some examples of the benefits and harms of artificial nutrition and hydration at the end of life from a medical view, and then I analyze the Islamic discourse on this treatment. This presentation is based upon my open access contribution, artificial nutrition at the terminal stage of dementia from an Islamic perspective, which can be downloaded also if you like. Dementia is an umbrella term that refers to a large number of types of progressive cognitive decline, such as the Alzheimer's disease, which is the most common form of dementia. First of all, I want to introduce you the stages of dementia. At the early stage, the patients face problems with short-term memories and have mood changes, and alongside with word-finding difficulties, communication is also increasingly challenging. Further early signs are difficulties with solving problems and performing daily tasks, such as cooking or driving a car. For this reason, people also misrecognize this stage and may consider that the patient is suffering from maybe senile age or depression in an older age. In the middle stage, it is no longer possible for the individual to conceal the changes because they find themselves experiencing considerable difficulties in everyday tasks and personal care. The impairment of long-term memory increases, but actions still learned at the early life remain available and can be used in the individual care. People at the late stage are typically unable to walk or to feed themselves. They are incontinent and aphasic, and they have lost the capacity to have relationship with other people. That's what Muriel Gillick says about this late stage. They have difficulties in swallowing, and incontinence occurs. The loss of appetite and desire for food is likely to lead to a lower food intake, malnutrition, and consequent weight loss. Ultimately, difficulties for carers in ensuring they take sufficient amount of food and liquids. However, artificial nutrition and hydration is an option at this stage of this late stage. In many cases, people in this terminal stage die from infections, however. First of all, I would like to examine the harms and benefits at the end of life when in tube feeding from a medical perspective. Food intake, swallowing, drinking are considered among the last everyday activities to be impaired in people with dementia. The results are malnutrition, difficulties with swallowing, and food refusal. In this advanced stage of the disease, people with dementia no longer know what they are supposed to do with the food in front of them or the utensils put in front of them. Behavioral problems emerge and eating skills are lost, Olga says. Studies show that a low BMI increases the mortality of people with dementia. However, food refusal may additionally be related to other factors. Distracting environment, for example, or poor fitting dental processes causing pain or gum inflammation may impact the food intake. In advanced dementia, the functional impairment of swallowing leads to aspiration before, during, and after swallowing. And this failure causes choking and increases that bacteria enters the lungs. There are the artificial nutrition and hydration should avoid this the entering of bacteria and the swallowing problems, but there are also disadvantages. The advantages would be that the overall nutritional status would be improved, and the current swallowing disorders would be dealt with. However, studies show that actually the benefits have not been proven yet. What studies do have proven is that there are many disadvantages. For example, when the tube is inserted in the body, the wound would infect, for example, or the person would have diarrhea. So actually the studies do not show any benefits. They actually show many side effects and many disadvantages. So from a medical perspective, the use of tube feeding is very contested, it's very controversial. So let's again remember our first slide. It is important how you classify this tube feeding. If you're trying to consider it from an ethical, religious perspective. So if you classify it as a medical procedure, you can refuse it, or you can undergo this treatment. But if you consider it as a basic need, from a religious perspective, you have to proceed tube feeding. You have to undergo this treatment from a medical perspective, from a professional perspective, but also from an individual perspective. So the refusal is not allowed if you consider it this way. Now let's dive into the discourses in the Islamic legal and Islamic Muslim medical discourses. There are proponents of this procedure, which consider tube feeding as a basic need. For example, physicians, Muslim physicians such as Muhammad al-Bar, Hassan Pasha, or Sami al-Islami and Shabi al-Ibai. and also a international organization which is considering also legal issues, but also bioethical considerations. The Islamic Fiqh Academy in Saudi Arabia decided in 2015 continuing tube feeding is significant at this terminal stage for the care of the patient. So, in this case, artificial nutrition and hydration must be continued in their perspective, and as a way to argue from an Islamic legal perspective, they take the precedent of the prohibition of killing detainees. The analogy from an Islamic legal tradition from Qatl al-Sabr. So they take this analogy and argue that the Prophet Muhammad prohibited the killing of detainees, so if someone who is detained should not be killed. This is almost the same idea and can be used as a precedent for this case of artificial nutrition, so no one should be killed by refusing artificial nutrition and hydration. So this is based on precedent by the hadith reported by Khalid ibn Walid.
We have 2 minutes left, Professor.
I will go on the opponents and then on the conclusion. There are opponents which argue that tube feeding is a medical treatment, such as physicians, Noura al-Nomai and Daysam al-Fayyad, and also Islamic scholars such as Muhammad al-Ghali. They argue it is a medical treatment, so we should assess it also from a legal perspective, Islamic legal perspective, with instruments such as weighing harms and benefits of the medical treatment. So if the harm is outweighs the benefits, we should refuse this treatment. And in the case of artificial nutrition and hydration, the harm weighs more than the benefits of it. And another religious argument would be that there is a consensus in Islamic scholarship that in futile therapies it is permitted to refuse the treatment. And in the case of late stage dementia, and it is a futile therapy to undergo artificial nutrition and hydration, so it is permitted to refuse from a religious perspective as well. Also, the Prophet Muhammad prohibited forced feeding, so he actually allowed that people who want to eat something should eat. For example, if they demand for wheat bread, they should eat this, but they are not. It is not allowed to force feed them. And another principle which can be applied also at the end of life is the principle of relief. For example, in illness, it is allowed to alleviate pain, and if you refuse tube feeding, it would also relieve the patient from the side effects which is considered with tube feeding. So the principle of relief can be also be applied at the end of life. So if you come to the concluding remarks, we can say that this Quranic duty to feed the hungry cannot be applied actually to the dying person. It is not the same stage. One is hungry and the other is not hungry. He is or she is dying actually and does not need nutrition. The religious argumentation is also that force feeding is not allowed, and the person has the right to refuse food. And if we are considering the benefits and harms and way they do the assessment and benefits of and harm assessment, the disadvantages of artificial nutrition and hydration overweigh. So we can also refuse because of the disadvantages. And finally, I want to raise more awareness of the effectiveness of palliative care, because people would like to alleviate pain, but they think that tube feeding is the effective therapy at the end of life, but there are way more effective therapies and which reduce pain in palliative care. This is the literature I have used so far, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hadil Labadi. I think from that, let's go directly to Professor Zainal, Dr. Zainal Abidin, not Bakir. Abidin bin Sanusi. Oh, you will use that.
Okay.
Please, okay.
Yeah.
Please directly, go ahead.
Is my slide on? Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera. Just for a change in this late afternoon, so that we wake up a bit. Yeah. What I'll be sharing is a bit more practical experience that we've got at the universities, International Islamic University. If you recall the presentations or the speaking or the speech of Dr. Diki, yeah, talking about Palestine, I was thinking that we here talks about ethics and accountability. So if we reflect, what have been the role of universities in exposing the students and the lecturers in talking about this? Who is accountable for this, the war that is happening in Gaza? So should we be held accountable for that? Yes, we should, yeah, we must. But what are we doing about it? Yeah? So that just reflects that, I guess there is another way, I mean, the way I see is that there's another way of looking at this. While I usually approach any topic in 3C, one is the context, the other one is the content, and the other one is communication. So I guess in talking about this accountability, I thought that we have missed the changing context of the functions of university. Meaning that we're still functioning in the old style of university. It's a pre-COVID kind of landscape. While COVID should have taught us a lot of lessons, meaning that accountability to who, to what context, to who stakeholders, to what environment. That is something that I'll be trying to look at. Yeah. So conventionally, these are the scope of accountability, either your academics or your students, they are your normal scopes. Yeah? So conventionally, there is no actual driving force behind it. It's just a normal, mundane accountability of you serving, following the curriculum, doing the assessments, exam, and etc., looking for academic freedoms, etc., peer review and evaluation. There's no strong guidance that would then be pushing you to be recalled, to think about what kind of accountability that we're talking about. Yeah? And then ethics and accountability become something that's a technical discussions, not of something that has to be happening on the ground, has to be acquired and has to be enforced, rather than just like an academic exercise. Yeah? So what I'm trying to go and move forward is that with that conventional way of looking at the scope or the context of functions of higher education, this is what we go through. Yeah? We know that there's sort of like a universal expectations of following template of certain way of development. Yeah? I put that as a westernized one, meaning that we're supposed to be talking about 4IR. Well, we know for a fact that either Indonesia or Malaysia, the half of population is not yet 4IR, but we are somehow. So in that context, there is a landscape that is not similar, but yet we are supposed to follow the same template. Yeah? And then we know very well that we talk about accountability. It means that there's a stakeholders, is a profit, right? So it's very economic centric. The functions of university is very economic centric. Another one is very industry led, and we will know that you are accountable to your stakeholders. Right? So that's what we mean that we are. The university is living to the functions of a bit of what we call it, back home in the university, we call it weird situations, right? So, and then reputations obsessed, we're talking about ranking, right? What does ranking have to do with ethics and accountability, right? If there is, are there measurement for that? Are there parameters measuring that? Are we adhering to the supposed ethics and accountability? No. Not at all, yeah? So, and then dehumanizing. So we've seen from the very beginning in the morning, there's a lot of discussions whether artificial intelligence is humanizing or dehumanizing or not. So these are the scenarios that we try to somehow see and somehow summarize. This is the world that we're in. This is the universities that we are in, yeah? But where are we going? Yeah? And where are we going is wiser. Yeah, so hopefully I've got the word there. So we are going to the scenarios or the functions of university whereby it's wholesome, right? So functions of university cannot just be functions of teaching only. It has to be function of research. It has to be functions of community engagement as well. It has to be inclusive. Yeah, we're lucky here today. We got one of the speakers talking about OKU or disabled. Yeah. And it has to be sustainable, and it has to be equitable, and it has to be resilient. And that's what we learned from the COVID exercise. But are we changing the context? Are we changing our curriculum then? I guess we are still following the same thing, right? We are talking about post-normal, we're talking about new normal. It's actually going back to the basics again, right? So if we expect to call or to really get a new round, a new momentum of ethics and accountability, it will not happen. Because the thing, we are still going back to the regional functions of university. Yeah? All right, so we are talking about, then we're talking about the future of humanizing society. So this is what we're going to. So my argument here is that there is a changing context that we need to look at, that we need to consider when it talks about accountability, when it talks about ethics. These are the scenarios that need to be there. Okay? All right? And for that to happen, there are 6 shifts that we talk about. Yeah? The education that we're giving has to be turned into edu actions, right? So because what is missing is the action part. I think we are not lacking of much knowledge anymore at this current age. We got ChatGPT, we got AI. What is missing? What is missing is action part. So it's why back home in the university we call it edu actions. All right, and we are very familiar to the words, to the keywords, to the tagline of publish or perish. Right, so now is a moment of where you do or die. Right, so look, consider what's happening in Gaza. All right, so what is our role there? Yeah, what should be the functions there? And we were talking about tangible impact factor. We know very well that we go for Scopus Journal, etc., because that is the impact factor of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But is that what matter? Is that the kind of ethics and accountability that we talk about? Or are we talking about real impact on the ground? We are accountable. We have to be ethical to the community that is outside there. Not just the industrial partner, not just the business partner, right? And we are not just talking about human capital, we're talking about human being, right? So this school of thought is referring to the fact that human is not a capital, human is a being, right? So then only you can talk about the values, then only you can talk about ethics and accountability, yeah? And for that purpose, of course, yeah, we've got to shift as well from technocentric to human-centric, right? So that is entailing from there. And from there, I guess if you follow the argument, the narrative that is happening in Japan is instead of 4IR, they're talking about 5SR, social responsibility, society revolutions, yeah? Social responsibility, societal responsibility. And instead of value-driven, monetary, so it's values-driven, right? So then only if you change if there is a shift that is happening, then only we can talk about bringing back the actual ethics and accountability. Yeah. All right. I'll skip that one. So this is what be happening. Yeah, while everyone can speak about this, everyone can give a lecture about this, about ethics and accountability, but unless and until we're doing something on the ground, not much will happen, and we'll be going the same cycle of universities meeting the need of the industry, still fulfilling the need of KPI, still fulfilling the need of finding impact factors, this and that. Yeah. So what happened in our universities is that we realized for a fact that there is a strong silos between between department. While the world out there is not something that can be divided into that perspective, it cannot be solved just by one disciplinary perspective. It has to be integrated. So what we do is to break the silos. Yeah. And we're looking at that into a bigger functions. It's not just meeting the economic needs. Yeah? So it's for human life and civilizations. The second is that we know very well that for that to happen, it has to be a structured flagship project. It has to be a structured program in order for the whole institutions to be embracing in the subjects. Otherwise, we are just be talking and talking again. Yeah? And very important that we realize that at the end of the day, we know that the students are lacking in soft skills, but we know for a fact that will they get the skills needed in the classroom? They won't. Right? We need to send them to the community, and this is what KKN is talking about, this is what Campus Merdeka is talking about. And back home, we make it compulsory for the students to serve 3 semesters with the community. So this is where we hope that they can see the real meaning of ethics, they can be really tested on accountability. Okay? All right, and of course we know very well that that is where experiential learning is taking place. Yeah, and this is what edu action that I'm talking about. So is actually bringing back. So you cannot be talking about ethics and accountability is the situation, the scenarios of university is still functioning like a factory. Yeah. And back in Malaysia, we use very specifically. We try to push this concept of insan. I guess in Indonesia, you're quite familiar with this, yeah, human being, and the very concept of sejahtera. So what it means by sejahtera is that we have to have our own indigenous wisdom and lifestyle that has been there for many years already. Yeah? Our ancestor, our culture has been there in living in the concept of sejahtera. So, all right, for us, we define sejahtera as a local concept for sustainable development. Yeah? And following to that, yeah, there is sort of like a similar shift that needs to happen. As you look at manpower, humanity, mind to the heart, empathy to high touch and compassion. Yeah. So the 6th thing that we try to do back home is that we make sure that the tagline of the university, the missions and visions of the university is being aligned to this purpose. Right? So because if it's not serving this purpose, then we'll be carried away by the pressure from the ministry that we need to publish, we need to have this grant and that grant. Okay? And for that purpose, ultimately we hope that we are able to somehow provide a new learning ecosystems. Then only we can talk about, ethics and accountability, right? And we know very well that ethics and accountability is something of the heart. So we were wondering whether all this while are we teaching, are we talking to the brain of the students, or are we talking to the heart of the students, right? So we are more of spiritual being or native being, okay? All right, 3 more minutes. So I'll quickly go to a video, and for that purpose, we are now working on a concept whereby community and universities working together. Right? And for that, because we think that unless and until the community and university working together, university is seen as this ivory tower, so all the knowledge that we have may not be relevant to the community. Right? So that's where we are focusing on the keyword of community. Right? So, and allow me to finish, Dr. Samsul, with this video, so hopefully it can play well and the voice clear. Okay.
From my point of view, we talk about the future, we want better human beings. In our case, we call it humanizing education. In other words, how do you train people to be better human beings in trying to manage their world and also the world outside? So we talk about education in that particular context as a holistic education.
By the way, this is the director of the university.
Transdisciplinary, inclusiveness, integration. This to me is about how do you create a total human person. And I said, I agree with you in the sense that when we talk about education today, it is totally fragmented. And more often than not, it is about an economic drive. Hence, you have the word human capital, for example. Human capital do not necessarily mean a good human being. And we want to go back to this whole idea, who is this human being? And I think it's already being spelled in many of the UNESCO sort of document. I remember the 4 pillars of learning. We have what learning to be. Learning to be is about creating that human person. In fact, the word that used in human to be is to create a complete human person. And we are very far from creating this complete human person. So this trying to attempt to make this work is to go back. And once you get this complete human person, then it is possible to envisage a complete institution using the holistic sort of approach. The approach must be holistic in the sense that it cannot be compartmentalized. Many a times, I think when we want to make change, we do it piecemeal. And oftentimes it doesn't work because we cannot connect it together. And the approach that we took, or we want to take at least, is to look at the whole institution approach. And the whole institution approach will have to depend on the whole person approach. And this is where I think your SDG comes in, when you try to connect the dots. The 14 dots, the 17 dots, it could be more than 17 dots. We discover this as we go along. For example, in our case, we're thinking of where is spirituality in this? We're beginning to envisage and reimagine the SDG 18. We talk about spirituality because that's the binding sort of glue between us human beings. Where everything else fails, spirituality will probably bind us together. So these are issues that I think will bring back to what education is all about. Once we are able to move the institution in a holistic manner, then we can envisage and see whether we can also move the society in a holistic manner. And hence we have the integration between society and university as a whole, no longer two separate things. The university goes on its way, the community goes on its way, and when the pandemic comes, we find this thing gets disrupted very easily.
Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Professor Zainal. And so I think that leads us directly to the next speaker, who is going to talk about creating cultures of human dignity. So the focus was human being for holistic education, for us to understand human being, and now we are going to see the very deep notion of human being dignity. So Professor Brett Sharp, the Director of International Center for Law and Religion Studies, Brigham Young Universities, time is yours.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Samsul and the organizers of this program, Dickie Sofjan and my good friend Zainal Bagir. This is so impressive to be at an event where most of the speakers are master's and doctoral students, where we're really learning from you. And we're grateful for the opportunity, some of us who are old timers, to have a chance to participate and be a part of things as well. This, I believe, is my 7th visit to Gajah University. I'm really grateful to be back after a long absence. The last time I was here was before COVID, so back in 2019. And I've interacted with some of you online since then, but it's really nice to be back together in person, and I want to express my gratitude for that. This year, we commemorate the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It was adopted on a rainy night in Paris, December 10th, 1948. And probably only one or two of us, maybe none of us in this room, were here on Earth when that happened. And so for us, this is a matter of not memory, but of recollection, recollecting what happened. And I think that's important at this time of an anniversary. And I think forward 75 years, and I wonder what will the legacy of human rights be 75 years from now? Will they be celebrated? Will they be realized? Will they be valued? Or will they be forgotten or dismissed as somehow a relic of a distant past? The truth is, as we commemorate the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights are under considerable strain and subject to withering criticism. The list I'm going to give is incomplete, but I will mention some of the forces that are presenting challenges to human rights and the human rights framework. The first is the idea that human rights are Western values rather than universal values. This is not actually true. The primary advocates of the human rights movement in 1947 and 1948 were newly independent countries and those who were still yearning to be independent countries. It was largely these countries that wanted to hold the great powers who were the victors of World War II accountable for the values for which the world had been told the war had been waged. A second stress point for human rights is the weaponization of human rights. Increasingly, we see human rights used as a way of criticizing our enemies, but we ignore the violations by our friends. Consider, for example, the deployment of human rights accusations with respect to the Palestinian war. A third challenge is the proliferation of human rights. The UDHR began with 30 brief articles, succinct and easy to understand. This is multiplied into multiple conventions with multiple rights. And the proliferation of rights is controversial, especially when it extends into the milieu of sex. And we try to speak about issues like abortion, or prostitution, or LGBTQ, or transgender rights through a human rights prism. Actually, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is silent on these issues, but at times these issues seem to be the main topic of human rights conversations. A fourth challenge is specialization. Increasingly, human rights discourse is the ambit of experts. This discussion can be very technical and very complicated. It results in what I sometimes refer to as the high church of human rights, which is very formal, very demanding, very ritualized, but quite exclusive of those who are not really deeply embedded within the doctrines of the high church. A fifth challenge is hypocrisy. We're quick to blame others for human rights abuses, but we're sometimes slow to find fault with ourselves. The final two challenges I want to mention are related. Number 6 is what I sometimes describe as human rights maximalism. This is the idea that human rights should do everything and solve all our problems and be the answer to every question. It turns out that this hope of human rights is bound to be a disappointment. The final challenge is human rights minimalism. This is the idea that human rights actually do nothing. They are weak or ineffective or perhaps even a lie. Many of these criticisms of human rights come from what I would describe as armchair critics, often critics who have tenured positions in universities. I've never really seen someone in a refugee camp or in a war zone say that human rights were unimportant to them. And if we look at the list of rights included in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and try to find one that does not matter to us, we'll be hard-pressed to find one. And so I believe that we need to try to reinvigorate and perhaps even renew and restore human rights discourse. And I'm grateful for the leadership that Gautam University is playing in this effort. There are just two endeavors that I have been a part of that I would like to mention. The first is the master's level course on religion and human rights, or Sharia and human rights. We've been working on a project together with Gadamaja University and Muhammadiyah University for nearly 10 years, and it's resulted in this rather large book called Sharia and Human Rights, a course book, and it includes about 15 chapters, half by Indonesian authors, half by foreigners, half by experts in human rights law, half by experts in Islamic Sharia, and it is an effort to sustain a conversation between these two legal systems, not to claim that they are identical or result in convergence, but to assert that there is something useful to happen by bringing them into conversation with each other. The primary partner from UGM on this project has been Professor Zainal Bagir. The second project I want to mention is a project that Dickie Sofjan and I, together with Paul Martins from Baylor, have been working on. This summer at Oxford University, we organized a small workshop on faith, the foundations, and the founding figures of human dignity, where we invited authors to write short chapters about different contributors to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And so Dickie, for example, wrote on the non-aligned movement and how human dignity was viewed from within that movement. I wrote about Eleanor Roosevelt. And we have a special issue of the journal, the Review of Faith and International Affairs, that will be published on December 10th, the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that collects these papers reflecting on how these founding figures thought about human dignity, which we believe is the foundational principle for human rights. Not only does human dignity occur in the first sentence of the preamble to the UDHR and in the first sentence of Article 1 of the UDHR, it was actually structurally quite important as the idea that broke the logjam after the first draft, which was hundreds of pages long. Getting to an agreed text that can fit on one piece of paper in 30 short articles was actually quite a remarkable achievement. And it wasn't made by starry-eyed idealists. This was an achievement of men and women who had lived through the crucibles of two global world wars that had culminated with the literal capacity to destroy humanity with the dropping of the atomic bomb. And so when we look back on the achievement of these people, I think we should do so with respect for their lived experience. They knew something about war. They knew something about genocide. They knew something about what global conflict looked like. And so I think we dismiss them as naive or old-fashioned or out of date or no longer relevant at our peril. We also believe human dignity is an important bridge that can build bridges between secular humanists on the one hand and religious humanists, and between religious traditions. It turns out that human dignity is a very important concept in many religious traditions, including the three Abrahamic faiths. It's important to Judaism, it's important to Christianity, and it's important to Islam. In the last few years, we have focused on human dignity with a variety of projects. One is the Punta del Este Declaration on Human Dignity for Everyone Everywhere, which was adopted 5 years ago on the 70th anniversary of the UDHR. Following this project, we have worked on books about religious perspectives on human dignity and judicial uses of human dignity. And this year, we've been working on 3 new projects. One is Asian perspectives on human dignity. We held a major conference at BYU Hawaii in April of this year, and we're collecting the papers from that conference into a book on Asian perspectives on human dignity. We're also producing a book on African perspectives on human dignity. This was an outgrowth of a declaration that was made in a conference in Botswana 4 years ago, followed up by a workshop held in the Ivory Coast, Côte d'Ivoire, in May of this year. And the third project is ongoing, and it is a project on Islamic perspectives on human dignity. We held a conference in Malaysia on this topic in July. There will be another next week in Jakarta, followed by a small workshop in Doha in December. And once again, our goal is to bring together a variety of scholars from within the Islamic tradition to share their perspectives on what human dignity means from various Islamic perspectives. Now, our goal is not to create one imperial definition for human dignity. That is not possible, nor is it desirable, we believe. Nor is it entirely about creating an overlapping consensus, although it turns out that when we listen to each other about human dignity, we learn a lot, and we learn that we agree in many ways. Rather, the real point is to create what we think of as points of light or points of illumination, ways of illuminating the world by sharing with each other what we understand human dignity to mean. And our goal through these projects is to amplify the voices of many who are not traditionally heard in academic and primarily Western academic discourse about human dignity, which tends to be very interesting but quite theoretical and philosophical. One project that we've undertaken with this in mind is this little book called Points of Light. This includes statements from about 100 of the signatories of the Punta del Este Declaration about what human dignity means to them. Again, not to achieve one definition or absolute agreement, but in order for us to learn from each other. Now, I want to conclude by talking about an issue which is very important and very difficult, but very topical, and that is human dignity at times of war and conflict. It's easy for us to talk about human dignity when we are amongst friends, but how do we think about human dignity when we are angry and in a defensive posture and perhaps in the midst of war? And here I'm thinking specifically of the Ukraine conflict with Russia and the Gaza conflict with Israel. This morning, Professor Sofjan said that he believes the Gaza war will be remembered for the failure of the Western world to support the Palestinians. And he may be right. The Palestinian saga is in large measure a story of failure by many, many actors, including Israel and those who support a Jewish state, including me, as well as the Palestinians and those who support them, including me. But the Gaza war may also be remembered as the culmination of the Muslim world's failure to find a way to live peaceably with the Jewish people. Our hope, of course, is that both of these possible outcomes are more dire than what the reality might be. So, what does human dignity teach us in times of conflict? And as I give you this list, I'm going to list them very briefly because I'm really out of time. But I'm going to mention 7 things that human dignity might do to help us in times of conflict. And think of conflict in your own life. It might be with a family member. It might be with colleagues at an institution. It might be with communities within your own neighborhoods. First, human dignity reminds us that we should not dehumanize the other. At times of war, it is common for us to describe our enemy in dehumanizing ways. We have heard this already in the Palestinian conflict from both sides, describing the other as vermin or rats or cockroaches or animals. We must resist the temptation to characterize our enemies as something other than human. They are, like us, created in the image of God, and they, like us, are entitled to the same measure of dignity and respect that we ourselves are entitled to. Second, focusing on human dignity helps us avoid blaming groups for the crimes of individuals. This is very common in times of war because there will be terrible things done by people, and it's very easy for us to attribute those terrible things to the entire group. Philosophers call this the fallacy of composition, where we maintain that what is true of a part, these individuals did something heinous and criminal, to the group, to the whole, thinking that the group as a whole is guilty of something heinous and criminal. When we get into the business of blaming groups for the actions of individuals, we will find ourselves on the slippery slope towards genocide. And this is not a slope upon which we want to find ourselves. Third, focusing on human dignity helps us de-emphasize us versus them thinking. One of the things that's interesting about human dignity is it's almost impossible to speak of my dignity without also acknowledging yours as well. And when we are in conflict, us versus them thinking is a very powerful impulse, a very powerful temptation. And one of the things human dignity can do is to help us reduce the volume of those feelings, the amplitude of those feelings. We're not going to overcome them entirely, but it's important for us to moderate and to modulate our us versus them thinking at times of conflict. Fourth, human dignity can help us avoid what we might think of as one-sideism. This is the prevalence of seeing wrongs done by the enemy very clearly and condemning them wholeheartedly, while we excuse wrongs done by our friends, by our allies, or even ourselves. Because after all, our powers of rationalization as human beings are perhaps one of our most highly developed skills. And so, avoiding one-sideism is a challenge at all times, but it's an especially acute challenge at times of conflict. Number 5, human dignity encourages us to not forget to distinguish between combatants and non-combatants. We heard some Palestinians argue from Hamas that there are no Jewish civilians, and so killing any Jew across the barbed wire fence was justified because they were combatants by definition. And similarly, some on the Israeli side say that there is no distinction between Hamas and Palestinians. because a lot of Palestinians support Hamas. Well, we must distinguish, and the Geneva Conventions, the law of war, remind us of the important distinction between combatants and non-combatants. Actually, the Geneva Conventions are worth remembering at times of conflict. These apply both to aggressors and defenders. So the rules apply equally whether we are on offense or defense. Second, it applies to you even if it has been disregarded by your enemy. So the fact that your enemy has disregarded the laws of war is not a rationale for you to disregard those laws. The distinction between combatant and civilian is a very strong and important principle, as are the principles of proportionality. When responding, your response must be proportional. It also requires the humane treatment of all persons in enemy hands. It prohibits murder, mutilation, torture, taking of hostages, unfair trial, cruel, humiliating, and degrading treatment. It also includes rules for the wounded, the sick, and the shipwrecked. As we think about the rules of war, in a way they can be reduced to 5 basic principles. Necessity, we only can attack when necessary. Distinction, differentiating between combatants and non-combatants. Proportionality, responding in ways that are commensurate to the harm that has been inflicted upon us. Fourth, humanity. This, I think, is where human dignity really comes in. We have to behave as human beings and treat others, including our enemies, as human beings. And the fifth is honor, behaving in a way that you will not be ashamed of yourself or unable to live with yourself at the end of the conflict. Finally, number 7. I believe that human dignity invites us to see each other, and to see each other as human beings, and in a best case scenario, to see each other deeply, to see each other for the depth of our humanity and not just for the superficial differences that distinguish us. Those differences are important. They're important to our identity. They're important to our individuality. But what human dignity reminds us is that in identity we are each different, but in dignity we are each the same. So I hope to conclude on an optimistic note. My hope is that as we think about these conflicts, whether it's the Ukrainian war or the Hamas war, that we will remember human dignity and think about the ways in which it needs to moderate not the other person and the way they're thinking and behaving, but myself, how I am thinking and how I am behaving. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's a challenging way to have that, but it is like what we need. The doctrine of human dignity in conflict, facing the conflict is very hard, but it is what we need to carry. Thank you very much for that. Okay, let's go to Pak Budi. Dr. Budi Irawanto, the head of performing and visual arts with the school. So please share your insight with us, responding the world, the complicated world. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mas Ancu. That's my nickname of Dr. Samsul Ma'arif. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for your coming. The benefit of being the last speakers is I can elaborate things that have not been discussed much by the previous speakers. So this afternoon I'm going to talk about disability as an ethical issue. In particular, I would be focusing on translating the ethics of care in the art field. Like the first plenary session this morning, I think this session is still male-dominated panel because only one female speaker in this panel. But in my presentation, I actually employ a feminist ethics called care ethics or ethics of care. Perhaps this is not coincidental since we are not only living under the masculine ethical principle and under the ableism ideology. Next, please. Okay, here is my presentation outline. I begin with a very brief introduction, followed by a linkage between ethics and disability. And before I'm explaining the ethics of care, I talk a little bit about the notion of care. After that, I discuss about applying the ethics of care into the art field. Next, please. Okay, here the introduction. As is well known, the dominant ethical discourse operate in terms of justice and right. I think Dr. Brett just elaborate about this in relation with human right and also human dignity, stressing the autonomy of an individual and impartiality in one dealing with others. However, it tends to neglect the responsibility to care for others and being sensitive to the interconnectedness between individual as well as the striving need to preserve relationship between individuals. Against this backdrop, the ethics of care should be considered as an alternative approach to the dominant ethical discourse, particularly when dealing with disability. Next, please. Discourse on disability are commonly associated with the issue of right, accessibility, and inclusivity. So much discussion about disabilities, usually a center issue about, let's say, inclusive education, inclusive public facilities, for instance, and also inclusive policy, something like that. In order to build an inclusive society, I think it needs ethics, which emphasize affection, empathy, relationship, and compassion when resolving conflict. I think what Dr. Zainal already discussed in his presentation is also mentioned about the vision about inclusiveness. Yeah, I think that's also the thing that we really need to concern when we talking about ethics of care. In the context of ethic of care, it's relevant in the making of inclusive society that one's interaction to the world does not harm others by stereotyping, degenerating, or excluding particular groups. So I think Dr. Brett already discussed also about the human dignity, and I think this is quite important kind of concept because then we can see human being as like Dr. Zainal mentioned about a complete human person. So when we are talking about disabilities, actually we are talking about the idea about being complete as a human. Okay, next please. So let me briefly explain about care. In everyday use, care refers to both mental disposition or concern and practices, activities that express that concern. Caring refers to the concept that the natural inclination of human is to care for one another. More specifically, caring can be understood as everything we do directly to help others to meet other basic needs, develop or sustain our basic capabilities, and alleviate or avoid pain and suffering in an attentive, responsive, and respectful manner. We should transform from simply caring about, this is, just simply require an attentive perception of need, but to caring for, is it require taking responsibility. Next, please. So here I quote one of the pioneers of, as a feminist philosophers who actually introduced the term ethics of care. And I read the direct quotation here. Caring, empathy, feeling with other, being sensitive with other feelings, all may be better guides what morality require in actual context. So from here, we can see that the central position of caring, and it's also part and parcel of sort of like a daily morality. Next, please. Ethic of care is the ethical system that establishes virtue as meeting the needs of others and preserving and enriching relationships. It promotes empathy and treating others in a way that does not hurt them. However, ethic of care is often understood to be detrimental to personal autonomy or independence of disabled people. This is because dependence is commonly constructed as a negative, in a negative light based on a liberal value. So basically, the ethic of care is actually a normative ethical theory that holds that the moral action centers on the interpersonal relationship and care as a virtue. So the ethic of care is really pay serious attention about the human relationships, and also concern about how empathy is so important in this process. The problem sometimes, the idea about dependent, is something. It's not really fit with the idea about, like individual freedom or personal independence or something like that. But in reality, actually, we as a human being, we always, are dependent with the presence of the other people, especially when we are, going to be elder people or to going old, then we really, depends of the help of the other people, right? And this is also what Dr. Mulyadi already mentions about we are actually as a, a social being, and also we uphold the idea and the principle of love, and the way how we, we interact with other people is actually based on that kind of principle. Okay, next please. Okay, not yet, so I think. Yeah, that one. Okay, so ethic of care is an ethical system that, okay, oh yeah, that's right. Okay, next. Okay, when we recognize that dependency is an important component of humanity, then we as a society can begin to confront our fear and loathing of dependency and with it of disability. Moreover, when we acknowledge how dependent on another save us from isolation and provide the connection to another that make life worthwhile, we can start to process of the embracing the need of the needed. Okay, 5 minutes, 1 minute, 5 minutes left. Okay, okay, thank you, Mas Sancho. Okay, so we can start process of embracing the needed dependency. Okay, let's move the core of my presentation this afternoon, translating the ethic of care into the art field. It is often suggested that the ethic of care is only applicable within families and friendship, but we can actually apply this principle and values from ethic of care in the various fields. And one of the fields is the art field. In the art field, making connection with the audience have been a main concern of the artists, as can be seen in the participatory art practices under the framework of relational aesthetics. Nicolas Bureau defined the relational aesthetic as a set of artistic practices which take as their theoretical and practical point of departure the whole of the human relation and their social contact rather than independent and private space. So this is, a lot of discussion about this and also some criticism about the idea of relational aesthetic. But the kind of participatory art encourage the new audience who have been underserved in the context of conventional art. Next, please. Okay, so this is the quotation from French philosopher Jacques Rancière. He said that art no longer wants to respond to the excess of commodities and sign, but a lack of connection. So if we look at the history of art, because art is actually inseparable from the community or ritual practices, and but because of the development of the modern society, then art becoming, a very sort of like isolated and sort of like a very autonomous kind of a field. But in fact, between art and society, we cannot separate it between art and society. So the more contemporary art attempts, to try to make connection back between art and society, and I think that the essence also about the ethic of care, how actually the artists is really think about the audience and the people, what they need, and so on and so forth. So next, please. So this is just an example. This is an exhibition by a Thai artist. Actually, if you look at that, there's no artwork. This is just only space, and actually the artist, is standing there and he's cooking, Thai food, tom yum, if not mistaken, and then invite all the visitors of the gallery and enjoy, and then they sit down and they talk each other, and this is actually his artwork. Okay. So the idea behind this is actually because this art should be make people connect to each other and have a conversation to each other. Next, this is also the other example, the collaboration between three artists, and the title is quite interesting. Do we dream under the same sky? So if you look at this kind of, how to call it, probably installation, you find out the screen over there and also some food, drink, and everyone's, sit down and watch, the looping video on the screen and discuss and talk, something like that. So again, this is the example of the participatory art, which require audience to active, in order to receive the work of art. Next. Okay, now I focus on the disability art. In the discourse of disability art, ethics of care can be applied in the way artists contribute to the imagination of the human condition, in which art spectators are reminded of the vulnerability of the body and the human violence. Moreover, the ethic of care should be taken into consideration when dealing with the collaboration art between disabled artists and non-disabled artists, who should listen attentively and attempt to understand the perspective of someone with different physical, cognitive, or intellectual condition in the creative process. Next, please. So this is the example. This is actually some work exhibited in the Disability Art Festival and Biennale this year, in which I was part of the curatorial teams. As you can see, those images show the articulation of the condition of disability. The first one on your right side is actually made by all actually made by disabled artists, and we can see that they try to articulate the idea about the muteness, and also how to find out their voice in order to articulate their condition. Next. Okay, this is quite spectacular. This is performed by Sue Austin, a British disabled artist, entitled "Creating the Spectacle," in which he uses the specially modified wheelchair to move underwater, equipped with the scuba diving equipment. This was a performance as part of the London Cultural Olympiad 2012 that showed the way she defied the limit of her mobility, and also try to show actually her condition, can perform quite spectacular kind of action. Next. Okay, this is not conclusion, but rather a final note of the topic that I am still working out. The ethic of care expand our notion that the ethical to include numerous everyday judgment, which identifies the need of all individual in any ethical situation through human relationship, and a sense that decision should arise from compassion rather than an attention to right or duties. Indeed, the ethic of care is not without its own set of problems, since individuals may need to cultivate the ability to distinguish between their own needs from those that they care for. Furthermore, the power imbalance may appear between caregivers and also care receiver, which can turn into a power struggle. I think that's also issue has been raised by Dr. Habil also about the relationship between someone who is dying and someone who take care about that. Okay, so with that, I finish my presentation. So be free to ask and give your comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I wish we have more time to have discussion, and this is in several minutes to come. Maghrib is coming, the dark is coming. So I would probably do this. If you want to leave, you feel free to leave, because for whatever reasons. But if you want to stay, we probably could have like 5-10 minutes to receive a question. If you do have a question, the burning ones. This topic is very deep, touch our heart. And so, if you have a question, probably one question we could use for all our speakers. No one is brave to raise questions. Okay, that is very much understandable. So why don't we do this? We invite you to come to the speakers afterward. If not for tonight, tomorrow, to talk more about the issue that the speakers were talking about, for us to have more discussion. So we thank you very much, and we are sorry for keeping you up to this time. Very long time, 5 speakers. Yeah, it was just not reasonable, like to have in 1 hour and a half for 5 speakers. Very interesting topics. So let's end our session here. Again, thank you very much, speakers, Prof. Brad, Prof. Zainal, Prof. Mulyadi, and Prof. Budi, and also Bu Hadil, ya, Dr. Hadil Lababidi over there. And so, thank you very much again. We wish you a very good night tonight, and then we will see you again tomorrow to follow or to continue our discussions in the sessions, in many sessions. So, demikian. Have a good night. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Mohon maaf jika ada kekurangan.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Anchu and all the speakers. And here is an announcement for tomorrow. Since we still have a session tomorrow, hopefully all of us who attend in this conference today can also attend the session tomorrow until the end of the session. Because by the end of this conference, there will be an announcement for the 3 best speakers during the conference. They will be awarded from the UGM Graduate School, and maybe one of you will get the prize from UGM Graduate School as a best speaker. Thank you very much, and see you tomorrow.